If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Jermaine
said, on my road to God's destiny, world if I just don't be phony, keeping my mind on the daily, cannot get lost on this journey. But these struggles try to chain me, don't wanna let me see your glory, but I'm fighting to be holy, so I hide and be lonely. Jesus, will you be my company? Am I pleasing you, Lord? Please tell me. I know I asked you before, but I'm feeling insecure and getting enough of you, so Lord, I am just asking you for more. Lord, you brought me from so far, and I just can't turn back now. Living for Jesus, and I'm not turning back. Oh, my friends, they laugh, but I'm not turning back. Temptation may come, cause I'm a Christian. That is a fact. Said I'm living for Jesus, and I'm not turning back. My friends, they laugh, but I'm not turning back. Temptation may come, but I'm just not serious to someone.
To know what some conking, go to know what pick up the conting. Some young girl but them want conking. When me and you know that's a dumb thing. All the fun of the mind is something. That's why so much less on the flunking. To the wrong rhythm and the jumping. To the wrong beat on the heart pumping. Christian stop on the grumbling. Well Jesus hype and a bunting. Stop putting my back and up front him. Start teach him like you are hunting. Every day when you get up and you need him. Give thanks in life and the reading. God called enough to be leading. Home if he turn me back way. Him go through the crucifixion and bleeding.
Oh, my friends, they laugh, but I'm not turning back. Temptation may come, but I'm just because I'm a Christian. Living for Jesus, and I'm not turning back. Friends, they laugh, but I'm not turning back. Temptation may come, but I'm just because I'm a Christian.
Jermaine, I'm not ashamed to tell the world that I am what I am. I am a son of the Most High. I am that I am. I choose not to stand alone because I'm not an island. I'm representing the King, the conquering lion.
I know word in my heart, so I won't be confused. Satan had me for so long, I know I am loose. My wife fleshly desire, my wife carnal behavior. Enjoy that last because no, my body will keep that pleasure. Living for Jesus, I'm not turning back. Because I am a Christian, yeah. I am living for Jesus. I'm not turning back. I'm a Christian. I want to live for you.
Good evening, one and all. I'm so excited about what is about to unfold here this afternoon. So excited. This is another one in the series of our Predestined Webinars. And these are empowerment webinars for the empowerment and wellness of women. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited about what we're about to discuss, about how we're about to be educated. We have a very interesting speaker, and she's all fired up and ready to go. But you know, we were just giving some more persons a little time to join. I want to say a very, very good evening to our audience on Facebook. In the various Facebook groups, I want to say welcome to Predestined. You'll get just a little taste tonight of what Predestined is all about. And I really hope that you do find the content most edifying. My name is Keisha Ann Thomas, and I am the founder and executive director of Predestined for Women's Empowerment and Wellness. Predestined essentially is an organization that focuses on strengthening women, empowering women, uplifting women. And our philosophy is that if you have overcome difficulty, you went through it for a reason. If you overcame, it's now for you to reach out to somebody else who is undergoing whatever it is that you overcame. You know, there are times people die from the things that we overcame. And so it's not for us to be ashamed of our past, and it's not for us to deny the experiences we've had, but it's for us to seek to use those experiences to uplift those around us who are going through similar challenges. If we overcame it, they can overcome it too. And that's the philosophy of Predestined. It's women helping women to overcome stuff that we overcame. So welcome, welcome, welcome once again. I'm looking forward to a very, very enlightening and uplifting evening. And before I go any further, I'm gonna pause for prayer, because one thing I know is that I would never be who I am. I'd never be where I am if it weren't for the God of my life, and that's the Almighty God. If you would bow your heads with me. Father, we honor you today. We thank you for another awesome occasion to give you glory. We thank you for another opportunity to minister to people who need to know that there's nothing in this life that they cannot overcome. And as we come before you, we ask for your guidance, we ask for your presence, and we ask for an excellent evening of empowerment and wisdom and knowledge. Be magnified, for this is to your glory. Let these women leave here strengthened and empowered to move forward. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much again. I want to say thanks to the ladies who've been working with me, who are online and making sure that everything goes well this afternoon, you know, ensuring that all those in the waiting room are allowed across, and you know, so that nobody's left behind today. I want to say good evening to all the ladies in the Predestined Women's Empowerment group on Facebook also. I want to say a special good evening to my parents. I'm certain they're online, Bishops Dr. Philbert Bailey and Reverend Maureen Millicent Bailey. Boy, did they do an excellent job when they carved me out. I'm just kidding, but God is good and I know my worth. So thank you all once again. And at this time, I am getting ready to hand over to our guest speaker. But let me tell you a little bit about what we're talking about today. Today's topic is empowerment versus wellness. Empowerment versus wellness. Navigating painful experiences. I don't know how many of you have ever been through something that could easily make you bitter, but you chose to be stronger. And today I'm here to encourage you that at the end of this session, do choose empowerment. Stuff happens, yeah, like what you just saw in the background. Don't worry about it, we'll fix that. But I encourage you today to choose empowerment over bitterness. Yeah, that could make you bitter, as simple as it is. But we won't be bitter about it because we know a God who can help us to overcome any painful experience. And so this evening, we have an excellent, excellent woman who is our guest speaker for the afternoon. Her name is Sherika Anderson. She is a psychologist with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica. And she has been speaking on our webinar series, our Predestined Webinar series. And this evening, she will also edify us. She is a lay minister. She holds many portfolios in her church, from youth leader to missions leader to just about, I don't know, but she's pretty young. But I think when I grow up, I want to be like her. Hello, Sherika. I'm so happy to have you online. Ladies, and I hope we have a few gentlemen too. I present to you today our speaker for the afternoon, lay minister Sherika Anderson. Woo! Over to you, Sherika.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I trust we're all well. Can everybody hear me clearly?
I am hearing you clearly, yes.
Awesome. Anybody else hearing me? Anybody else want to just unmute your mic and say, yes, I'm hearing you?
We're hearing you.
Awesome.
I'm hearing you, Sherika.
Hearing you clearly.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, I greet our host this afternoon, a woman after God's own heart, the visionary, the executive director, so many acts. But I speak of none other than Miss Keisha Ann Thomas, Mrs. Thomas, Miss Thomas, whatever you refer to her as. She is a blessing and an asset to the kingdom. And I just want to bless you, woman of God. I acknowledge your parents. I'm not sure if they're here, but they usually are. So I bless you also. I greet you well in the name of Jesus. And to all those persons who are here, who are a part of the team, who are associated with this ministry in one way or another, I salute you. And of course, I think I heard Mrs. Wilberforce, my colleague. I just want to say pleasant afternoon to you, ma'am. All right, so to all those who are viewing us by Facebook Live, to those who are on the Zoom platform, again, pleasant afternoon. We're going to be going into the presentation shortly, as soon as I'm allowed to share my screen. But today we will be talking about empowerment versus bitterness. And I'm particularly excited about this topic because bitterness is one of the things that we tend to overlook, but the impact of it is transformational. The impact of it is life-changing. It affects every area of our lives. And so we're going to be talking about bitterness, we're going to be looking at bitterness in depth because knowledge is empowering. Knowledge in and of itself is empowering. All right, let's go. So, as you can see on the screen, it is bitter or better, right? And this picture really spoke to me because it is so profound when you look at the difference between bitter and better, right? And so as we go in, I want us to bear this in mind because we have all had painful experiences. We have all had different experiences. And perhaps, just maybe, right now, some of us are on the side that says bitter, but I'm hoping and trusting that by the end of this presentation, we'll be able to move over to the other side that is more flourishing, that looks more enticing, that looks more, uplifting, the side that is better. All right, so these are the things that we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at Naomi, a case of a bitter woman, and Naomi from the Bible, and we will be referring to Naomi from time to time just to ensure that, we're applying the content. We want to look at definition of bitterness as well as empowerment. We want to look at a letter or a journal entry from a bitter woman. We look at the cost of bitterness, the cure for bitterness, dealing with bitterness, protecting against bitterness, looking at myself, conclusion, and then we will have some questions and answers. All right. I'm going to be asking us just to reserve our questions until the end. Just to hold our questions until the end. All right. So let's look at Naomi. Most of us are familiar with Ruth and Naomi's story in the Bible, but just to pull out a few points. So what we know is that Naomi and her husband and 2 children relocated to another country. While there, things were going well. Her family expanded. Her 2 sons got married, but then life happened. Then she lost her husband, and she also lost her 2 sons. Eventually, she decided to pack her things and, head back home because nothing was happening where she was. She decided to head home. Her daughters-in-law were willing to accompany her, but Naomi discouraged them, right? One decided to turn back, but Ruth decided to move forward with her mother-in-law. So here again, we recognize that she lost another member. She lost another daughter-in-law. Then she arrived home and everyone was happy to see her, right? Persons were excited and elated to see Naomi and her daughter-in-law, but her response is just mind-blowing. And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? Now, I don't know about you, but if we really think about this conversation, this really sounded like a bitter woman, right? And we're not disputing her bitterness. We're not saying it is appropriate or not, because she had gone through a lot, right? Now, let's look at some definitions. Empowerment. Empowerment is the process of becoming. It is a process. It is a process, which means it takes time and it is a step by step. So empowerment is the process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling one's life and claiming one's rights. So it is a journey and it is a process, right? Dr. Stephen Diamond defines bitterness as a chronic and a pervasive state of smoldering resentment and regards it as one of the most destructive and toxic of human emotions, right? Gregory added to this and said, bitterness is unforgiveness fermented. And at the very bottom, we have a nice picture which says bitterness kills. So as we move forward, I want us to recognize just the definition of bitterness. Now, this definition sums it up nicely, right? It is chronic and it is a pervasive state of resentment, which means that bitterness also takes time to develop, right? As we move on this afternoon, we'll look at it more in depth because knowledge is empowering. Now, let's look at a journal entry from a bitter woman. I think this is so enlightening and it sets the pace nicely for why we would want to be empowered instead of being bitter. So she said, bitterness, it starts out small, and then an offense burrows its way into our hearts. We replay it in our minds, creating deep ruts that will be hard to build back up. We retell our hurts to any available listener, including each detail. We enlist support, pushing us further into our resentment. We hear the offending person's name and we cringe. We decipher the offense as intentional and our offender as full of spite. We look for other reasons, both real and imagined, to dislike our villain. With each new piece of information, we form another layer of bitterness. We fool ourselves into thinking no one will know. But anger and resentment have a way of seeping into everything. Bitterness is like a beach ball. We try to submerge into water, but no matter how valiant our efforts, it pops up with all its vitality, splashing everyone around us. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any gentlemen on the platform or watching, I want for us to recognize, as it says, splashing everyone and everything around us. That's just how powerful bitterness is. But let's look at the process, right? There's offense and hurt. So as we interact with people, as we go about our daily lives, hurt and offense will happen. It's a must, right? However, what happened after the hurt and the offense happen dictates what further happens. So after the hurt or the offense, let's look at Ruth and Naomi. The hurt happened, she lost her husband. And then on top of that, she lost her 2 sons. And then she had to journey home, right? Her thoughts concerning the hurt and the offense plays a big role in what happened in the overall outcome. So for some persons, once they have experienced the hurt and the offense, the thoughts include that person was malicious. That person have committed great injustice towards me, right? They were intentional. They deliberately hurt me. And we think on these thoughts and we think, how can someone be so wicked and I didn't deserve this and I deserved better. And we think on these thoughts. And what happened eventually is that our emotions are now affected. And so anger and resentment start to chip in. And if it is that we don't deal with the anger and the resentment and the unforgiveness and the wrath, if we don't deal with those things, but we push them aside, they begin to fester. And what eventually happens is bitterness. So let's go back to Ruth. She and Naomi, she encountered painful situations that she wasn't expecting. Life happened and she lost stuff that she valued. But then her thoughts may have been, and we could see it, God, you are wicked. God, how could you allow this? God, you took not only my husband, but also my sons. And then my daughter-in-law decided to leave me too. God, you are being unfair. I did not deserve this, God. I wonder if this evening some of us can, relate to this experience. And after, because the events happen over a period of years. So those anger and those resentment and the grief and the loss started to build. And then we saw a woman who was bitter. But it's a process. It didn't happen overnight. And so some of us, we are at a place called bitterness, but we didn't get here yesterday. It happened over time. Just to point out this picture at the top, it says, bitterness is its own prison. Now, I want us to wrap our minds around that. It means that bitterness it causes restriction. It can cause stagnation. It limits and it affects us significantly. Bitterness is its own prison. Another picture that just speaks volume to the magnitude of the impact that bitterness can have. And I'm doing all of this to lay the foundation this evening that somebody will say, I am in a place of bitterness, but I am moving to a place of empowerment. Bitterness is a small crack in the windshield of your relationship, right? And we know once there's a crack, it spreads. And then it starts to affect everything. And before long, everything may crumble. That's how powerful bitterness is. Now I want us to look at the cost of bitterness. But even before we dive in, I want us to look at the picture, the image at the top. This is some of us this evening. We are carrying a weight. We are carrying the load of bitterness. And we can barely manage. We can hardly manage it. But the fact is, it is there, right? And I'm trusting that this evening, somebody will choose to let that bitterness go. So let's look at the cost of bitterness. Usually we would say the effect, but I want to use the word cost because really that's what it is. It costs us in every area of our life. Sometimes the benefit of retreating into victimhood and we take on the role and the mindset of a victim, sometimes it allows us to feel comfortable. But at the same time, that carries with it a very high price tag that causes bitterness, right? So one of the main costs or one of the costs that we want to look at is that it prolongs your mental and emotional pain, and it may even make it worse. Right? So as long as there's bitterness, the healing cannot manifest. As long as there's bitterness, we are going through a cycle of pain and hurt, and it's almost as if reliving what happened. So we relive the situation, we relive the scenarios so much that we can tell the details, every details out of our head. It leads to long-lasting anxiety and or depression. A lot of persons today are experiencing anxiety and depression, and at the root of it is bitterness. It precipitates vengeful acts that put you at a further risk for being further hurt or victimized, and possibly engulf you in a never-ending, self-defeating cycle of getting even. Now, I know sometimes as Christians, we say, oh, we forgive and we forget because we are to forgive. But sometimes the truth is, deep down, we are saying, God, you have to punish him. God, you have to punish her because I did nothing wrong. I was a faithful worker, but my boss did me wrong. God, will you not judge? Right? And sometimes even without intention, we commit to vengeance. We commit to revenge. We commit to defending ourselves. Right? And what that does is that it keeps us in a cycle of, it's almost as if we're going around the mountain instead of crossing over to the promised land. It prevents you from experiencing the potential joys of living fully in the present versus dwelling on the past. And sometimes, if we're really honest, because of the bitterness, because of where we are in a place of bitterness, we are unable to enjoy what's happening. God just blessed us with a new job. We just got a promotion, but we are unable to fully enjoy it because we are dwelling on what had happened. And so bitterness prevents us from enjoying and living life to its fullest in the present moment. Other costs include, and as we look at the bottom of the picture, these pictures are so powerful, I had to include them. There's a ball, a bitterness ball that is eaten into life, and we see the pieces, we see the fragments, right? And that's what bitterness really does. It's almost as if it breaks, it creates, and it shatters our lives. Now, another cost is that it creates or deepens an attitude of distrust and cynicism, right? Qualities that contribute to hostility and paranoid thinking. So some of us, based on what we have experienced, we are pessimistic. Now, the truth is, persons don't really enjoy being around pessimism. They don't really deal well with distrust. And what happened is, because we are in a place of bitterness, these are also things that we are dealing with. And so what happened is, we will find persons who are loyal, persons who are committed to us. But because we are in that place of bitterness, we become distrustful. So we start to think, okay, why is Johnny being so nice to me? What exactly does Johnny want from me? Or I'm not even trying again because this is not going to work. So we have a very pessimistic view, and sometimes we're very paranoid. But it can be evidence of the fact that there's bitterness lurking around. It interferes with us cultivating healthy and satisfying relationships, and it leads us to doubt or connection to others, right? We can look at Naomi again. Her daughter-in-law was willing to go with her, was willing to take the journey. Look at it. Her daughter-in-law was willing to journey with her to a foreign land because it would have been foreign to her, right? But instead of welcoming that, and we can understand that she was just thinking of their well-being, but we want to recognize that sometimes because we are in a place of bitterness, we compromise some good relationship, right? And sometimes we push people away out of fear that they will leave eventually, right? The next thing is that it compromises or it weakens our higher ideals and adversely impacts our personal search for purpose and meaning in life. Because of just how powerful bitterness is, sometimes we spend so much time focusing on what happened, focusing on the experience. And 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, and instead of thinking of purpose and thinking of life and, you know, what exactly am I created to do in the earth, we are distracted by what happened. It also robs us of vital energy that could be far better employed to help us achieve our desires and achieve set goals. And so, my friends and families, we're family now, and families, I want for us to recognize that bitterness is costly. When we look on the image on the left, we're seeing that skull-looking thing, which normally means danger or poison. So it's a bottle that, let's say, it contains bitterness, but it is also poisonous. And that's what bitterness is. It is poison. It also affects our physical health. The chronic anger that is bitterness can raise your stress level. It affects your immune system, right? It also keeps us in a state of bondage, and it erodes our sense of well-being. Look at the picture on the right, my right. Bitterness beating into life. Look at that. It's just shattering it. And I'm happy that the picture is here because sometimes we don't recognize the magnitude of the effect of bitterness. But this picture, it speaks volume into what it does. Bitterness not only causes symptoms of trauma like sleeplessness, fatigue, and the lack of libido, but it also affects us internally. It can lead to low self-confidence. It can lead to negative personality shifts, and of course, an inability to have healthy relationship. Now, I am sure you're agreeing with me that this is not something we want to entertain at all. Now, this is a tree, and it says it is a root. Bitterness is a root, right? Now, when we look at it, it leads to so many other negative things. It leads to clamor, wrath, anger, malice, slander, right? And perhaps we can have death. If not death individually, it can cause us to actually kill other persons. And so we recognize that some of the things that we're dealing with now, if we look deeper, if we dig deeper, we will recognize that at the root of everything is bitterness. The question to us today is, do you want to continue to see yourself as a victim with all the implications of helplessness embedded in that defeatist label? So don't get me wrong, we were wronged. We didn't ask for it. We didn't cause it, right? But it happened. But the question is, do we see ourselves as the victim, or do we move on to being a victor? Consider that if you obsessively is a strong word, but it is the right word. If we obsessively think on the righteousness of our anger, our wrath will only become further inflamed. This means that sometimes the truth is we're saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I have all right to be angry. I have all right to how I feel. He deserves my anger, or she deserves my anger, right? But the more we think along this path and the more we bear this in mind, it is the more that our wrath builds up. And so we have to be mindful that we are doing ourselves a disservice. The final point says, the truth is, you don't really have any control over the other person. Some of us, we have been hurt by church. Some of us, we have been hurt by family. Some of us, our hurt has been linked to the workplace. We have worked for years and then they just put us aside. But whatever the cause of the hurt is, we only have control over ourselves. And for me, that alone is empowering. Because if I have control over me, then I can decide what I do. I can decide how I act. I choose to move on. I choose to be empowered. As we look at the picture on the right, we see bitterness on a big everything, and the chains that are bound to another person's feet. And it's showing us that, hey, he's not free to move about freely. He's not able to walk about freely, right? He's actually bound. And that's what bitterness does. Now, if we can look at the cost of bitterness, I'm sure that your question is, well, if this is so costly, I want to put it down. How do I really get over this bitterness? And to my right, I saw this picture and it's powerful because it says bitterness is a choice. Let's just think about that for a minute. Mark you, we don't intentionally choose to be bitter. But with every decision that we make, it either takes us to bitter or it takes us to better. And that's what this picture is saying. It's saying that you have a choice in this matter. Now, your personal power is pretty much limited to yourself. And that is a whole lot of power right there. That is a whole lot of power. Even in the face of injustice, redirecting your focus inwards is precisely how you go about empowering yourself. Sometimes it's easier to think about everybody else and who never stepped in and who never apologized and who didn't do it right. And we think about all of that. But this evening, as you listen to my voice, let us look inside. We're turning the spotlight on us. We're looking at us this evening, not on whoever wronged us. We have spent enough time looking over there. No, we're looking at us. Because reflection, introspection can lead to empowerment. Now let's continue talking about the cure. When we look over here to my right again on the picture, you see I have a lot of pictures for you because the pictures are powerful. We have two options, bitter or forgive. And it says bitterness destroys the soul, but forgiveness liberates it. That's powerful. The most powerful way to deal effectively with the deadly emotion called bitterness is forgiveness. According to Gandhi, the weak people in character cannot forgive. Forgiveness is for the strong. Now, when I read this, I was like, really? That's a very, I don't agree. Initially, I was saying, Mr. Gandhi, I don't agree with you. I am strong. But then when I thought about it, I recognized that forgiveness required strength. I recognize that really it requires a lot for us to forgive, right? Only the person who knows his value and is secure can easily forgive. And even that easily forgive right there still requires some amount of intentionality and it requires commitment, right? In fact, to sincerely say, I forgive you, or to say, please forgive me, shows a state of inner security and inner strength. It does not in any way reduce us, but rather proves a healthy self-image. And so this might be a bit much to swallow, but I challenge us to think about it. Forgiveness requires a lot of us, but the benefit of forgiveness cannot be overstated. We continue. Again, on the right, we see a prison cell that's open, and we see the birds flying out. And it says, forgiveness is to set a prisoner free and to discover that prisoner was you. No, that's powerful right there. That's powerful because sometimes we make forgiveness about the other person. I'm not forgive him because I'm wicked. I'm not forgive him. I'm not forgive her. I will not. I cannot forgive. I cannot forgive. And please note, I am not saying that it is easy. As I said earlier, I believe that it requires a lot. But when we do forgive, it is like the antidote for bitterness. And it really is setting you free. It is setting me free, right? The one who is emotionally intelligent, healthy, and secure can easily forgive and ask for forgiveness. But the emotionally unhealthy person will continue to harbor bitterness and will find it difficult to forgive. Forgiveness is a power that liberates. It liberates first the one who is bitter and decides to forgive, then the one who has caused the bitterness, and finally all the persons involved in the process. So it's that powerful. It's liberating everybody, but it starts with us. And so we're not saying that, it's easy, get up and forgive and move on. No, it's a process. It is a process. But what it requires is being intentional that I am going to forgive. Not because of the person, but I'm doing it so that I can be free and so that I can move on. We continue to look at the cure, you see? Very insightful, I hope. So at the top, it says, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Now, sometimes we're very good at giving other persons gifting. We're very good at taking care of other persons. And sometimes we don't pay enough attention to us. But forgiveness is one gift that we give to ourselves. All right? Now we can continue. It's also key to realize that even if the other person has been guilty of intentionally hurting you for no reason other than their own satisfaction, it still makes sense to forgive them. Now, maybe the younger version of me would say that don't make any sense at all. But thank God. Even if the person was intentional in what was done, even so, forgiveness is still the antidote for bitterness, right? Forgiveness is not dependent on whether the person accidentally or intentionally hurt you. Now, whether they've displaced their rage towards someone else onto you, or whether they're totally devoid of any empathy or common decency, your bitterness nonetheless causes you far more harm than it does them. So whether it was accidentally really that they were upset with somebody else, but you just bear the blunt of it, or even if the person doesn't have the common decency to say, I apologize, your bitterness is still causing you more hurt than it is causing them, right? And the final point says, in such instances, forgiving them is really about letting go of your retaliatory rage, simply so that you can move on to enjoy whatever satisfaction life continues to offer you. So as we think about empowerment, we have to talk about forgiveness. Now, the truth is sometimes it becomes tricky because especially as believers, we're told you need to forgive and forget and move on. But the reality is forgiveness is a process. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves to say, hey, it is still there. To say, hey, yes, it is years, but I still haven't fully forgiven him or her. I'm still struggling a little, but guess what? When we have prayer at church, We don't really go up and say, please pray for me because I'm struggling with bitterness. Because then the church may look at us as, how dare you? You are a Christian. You should have forgiven, right? And somehow we treat bitterness that particular way. So persons sometimes tend to hide it, to sweep it under the rug, because we may feel as if it makes us less of a Christian, when in reality, that doesn't affect our Christianity. We are still Christian. We just need help to deal with the issue. All right? So now that we have looked at the cure, we're going to spend some time talking about dealing with it. So if you recognize that it's already there and you're in a place of bitterness, what can we do practically? Now, James Messina presents a 5-step plan to help us to work through this. The first step says, identify the source of your bitterness and what this person did to evoke your resentful feelings. Now, of course, remember we spoke earlier about introspection and reflection. So now we need to really think, what exactly caused me to be in this place? When exactly did I get to this place? We can look at Ruth, right? And we can see clearly that Ruth, Naomi encountered a series of loss. Well, Ruth lost her husband too, but Naomi encountered a series of loss. So we can see clearly what had happened to cause her to be bitter. She felt like she lost everything. And so for us this afternoon, it's for us to really think, what exactly is the source of my bitterness? What exactly caused me to feel like this? Was it my parents? Was it a broken home experience? Was it school? Was it something that the teacher said? Was it on the job? I expected better from the boss, but he disappointed me. What exactly caused me to feel like this? Was it a failed relationship? I thought, we were going to get married and he married someone else. What exactly is the source of bitterness? And after we identify that, because more than likely we know, but for some persons we may have, buried it so deeply that we have to dig a little bit harder. That's okay. Dig until you find out what it is. Search, soul searching, until you find out what it is. Secondly, develop a new way of looking at your past, your present, and your future. Look at how resentment and bitterness has negatively affected your life and how letting it go can improve your future. Now, mark you, this may be a painful exercise, but sometimes, like when you have a cut, you have to dig out the inside before you can apply the dressing. Yes. So we have to go back and really look. How did it affect my past? When I look back on my past, maybe I had to start over from ground zero. Maybe I had to rebuild some relationship that I really wasn't interested in going back to. How did it affect my past? How is it affecting me now? Is it that I'm pushing people away? I'm not trying to establish friendship because of the fear that someone may betray me or someone may leave me again? How is it affecting me now? And if I continue on this side, how will it affect my future? It is insanity to not change anything and expect a different result. So we are saying, if it is that we do our assessment and we say, this is how it's affecting me now, but I want my future to be different, then it means that we will have to change some stuff. Now, pay keen attention to point 3. It says, write a letter to this person or persons. Some of us, we have more than one. Or maybe it's even God. Some of us may be bitter at God, right? But we won't say this out loud because we don't want persons to say, oh, we have backslidden. But some of us, we have been bitter towards God. So write a letter to the person describing the offenses that toward you. Then make a decision to forgive and to let go. I'm done going about this in my mind. I'm done replaying the same situation. I am done. And it may require that every day we get up, we have to make a commitment to being done with that. Because naturally, over the years, our response would have been a particular way. But now we're saying, I'm not going back to the same way of processing. I'm not going back to looking at it the same way. And so each day may require us making a commitment to being better. No, it says, don't send the letter. You can just rip it up. The purpose is to get it all out of your system. Write it in detail. It may be hard, but write everything. Write everything. And then you can discard of it. And number 4 says, visualize having a better future. Know that you have neutralized the negative impact of the bitterness. So now think about what will be different and what will be better because you are better, right? And because you're choosing to be better. And that in and of itself should be a source of motivation. So this is what will change. I'll feel more confident about myself. I will believe in me again. I will start establishing friendships and relationships again, right? The 5th one says, if bitterness or resentful feeling remain, just start over again. Remember, we're on a process here. We're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and it's all gone. So we're on a process. We're on a journey. So it may mean going back to number 1 a few times. That's okay. Give yourself the grace and be patient with yourself to go through the process to become better. Also, of course, there's prayer and fasting and the scriptures. Meditate on the scriptures. There are 2 scriptures that I want to highlight for us. Ephesians 4:31 and 32 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with malice. Now, after looking at everything, now we can understand why the Apostle Paul would encourage us to put aside all bitterness because of the effect that it has on every area of our life. Hebrews 12 and verse 15 says, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, right? So we have to ensure, be watchful and guard our heart so that no root of bitterness springs up. All right, we're doing well. And of course, this had to be a part of it because some of us, we need professional help. And listen, it's fine. It's fine if you're saying, I need to talk to a counselor or I need to talk to a psychologist. It is okay, right? The stigma that's associated with psychologists and therapists, we are moving beyond that. In fact, since it really is to make me better and for my overall empowerment, I am willing to do it despite what persons say, right? So it is okay to seek help, seek the help of a mental health professional, right? Because sometimes we also need someone to guide us, to help us to recognize what exactly is feeding the bitterness, because sometimes we really can't put our fingers on it. So we have looked at the cost, we have looked at the cure, we have looked at dealing with it. Now we want to look at how do we really protect ourselves against it, right? Because after we go through this presentation and over the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months, and we are committing to dealing with it, we also want to protect ourselves. And for some of us who have already gone through the process, we want to protect ourselves from harboring bitterness again, right? So one of the first things that we have to do, we have to learn conflict management. We have to have the ability to confront issues and to solve conflict, because those things will happen. There is no maybe, there is no if. Conflict will happen, right? Learning to deal with conflict is an art which should be learned. So maybe we need to go and read a book on conflict management. Maybe we need to go listen to a few teachings on YouTube on conflict management so that we are able to deal with conflict. Conflicts are inevitable, and truth be told, they are necessary in relationships and teams. But conflicts not well solved or ignored long enough will lead to broken trust, bitterness, and thoughts of revenge or negative emotion, right? So you see, if it is that we can solve some conflict well, it prevents the bitterness from coming and taking up root. So we have to get the conflict management part of it right. Also, we can't keep people from offending us, but we can prevent the negative emotions by using these 3 R's that were suggested by Mr. Kenneth. These R's are realize, recognize, and refuse. Let's look at them individually. So the first R is realize. Realize that bitterness is a real thing, right? There's no going around it. There's no joke. It is a real thing. We need to realize that bitterness will come our way and it is inevitable. So we won't get to a place where bitterness just doesn't happen. It will happen. But whether we will become entrapped and ensnared by it is a choice we need to make. The picture on the side is just so profound. Again, Martin Luther King Jr., he said, never succumb to the temptation of bitterness. So it's there, right? I've had experiences when I've been offended and I literally felt myself in the middle, leaning towards becoming offended and bitter and angry, and choosing to say, you know what? I'm not going down that route. And that's what we have to be conscious of. Standing in the middle. The temptation to be bitter is right there. And if we look, we can say, yes, it is very justified because he did me wrong or she did me wrong. But never succumb to the temptation of bitterness. Next is recognizing bitterness. No, I don't know about you, but when I look at this gentleman, perhaps there's a little bitterness there, but he's saying bitterness. What bitterness, right? It's important that we recognize it. If you can't recognize this negative emotion, it will be difficult to guard against it or to deal with it. So we have to be in a position to recognize bitterness. According to Robert Cooper, feelings provide us with vital and potentially profitable information every minute of the day. So this feedback from the heart, and not necessarily the head, is what keeps you honest with yourself, right? It ignites creativity, it shapes our relationship, and close to the bottom, it guides us in unexpected possibilities. That's what our feelings do. So when we start to feel a particular way, it is an indication of what's happening with us. Now we need to pay attention to these feelings. What is it saying? You know, these days we're just so angry, we're just so bitter, we're just so miserable. What exactly is it telling us about us? Right? So we need to recognize the bitterness. And don't be like this gentleman who is bitter and saying, what bitterness? It's not bitterness. I'm okay. You know, how are you today? I'm okay. I am not bitter. I am not angry. Nothing like that. I am fine. God is good. Don't be like him. Recognize the bitterness and then work on it. And the final R is refuse to master your negative emotions. And the picture at the bottom says, warning, close the door. Keep that door closed. You can keep bitterness from gaining an entrance into your heart in much the same way you might refuse to open the front door of your home to anyone who knocks. So it's a choice. We can choose to decide, all right, I'm not doing this again. I'm not letting you in. I'm keeping you out, right? According to Daniel, great leaders move and ignite our passion. They inspire the best in us, not by some idea, vision, or strategy, but by their emotion and the ability to be a master over it. The final point just sums up everything nicely. Your ability to be the master of your emotion, manage your stress, and control your moods will greatly influence your ability to lead and to be successful in any work or interpersonal endeavor. So we don't want to become master of negative emotions. We want to master the positive ones. And so this evening, I challenge us to close the door. When we recognize that we're heading down a particular point, do what is necessary to prevent it from coming into our hearts and setting down roots. Now, these two birds, I don't know birds. I don't know if they're pigeons or parrots, but they're birds. They're so cute. So one is saying, what is the opposite of bitterness? And the other one is saying, well, it's sweetness, contentment, geniality, happiness, joy, comfort, warmth, goodwill, and empathy. So it's everything good. It's everything that we would want, right? Now, can we imagine choosing bitterness instead of being well, empowered, or better? We would be giving up all these things. So let's look at the process again. What is it that caused you hurt? And now we are introspecting, we're looking at us. We have said so many things. We have spoke about a lot. Theoretically, now let's look at the practical part of it. And wherever you are, I challenge you just to think and to be honest. The hurt or the offense happened. Who hurt you? Was it the church? Was it family members? Was it from marriage, relationship? Was it work? Who hurt you? And what thoughts have you been harboring concerning the event? I know for me, at one point, I just kept saying, I did not deserve this. I did not, and I would play this over daily. I did not deserve this. I did not deserve this. Is that one of your thoughts? I did not deserve it? Truth is, maybe you didn't. But does replaying this thought help you to move forward? Other thoughts? He or she was wicked. That person intentionally hurt me. They knew if they did that, it would hurt me, and they still did it. Just wicked. Or are we saying, you know, I really want him or her to feel what I went through? Or maybe there are other thoughts that you have just been meditating on. They have been playing over and over and over and over. And for some of us, we have been holding on and saying, I just can't forgive. That has been the thought. I know I should. Lord, I know your word says that I should. But Father, I just cannot forgive. Right? And these left to fester, of course, they lead to anger and bitterness. And so tonight, we may be in a place of bitterness. We're not exactly sure how we got here or when we got here, or some persons know, but this is where we are. And so after hearing everything tonight, the question is, do I continue to be bitter, or am I making a commitment to myself to become better? Let's look at Naomi. Naomi left out happy with her family, and things were going well. Then life happened. She didn't plan for this. She wasn't expecting it. She was not prepared. But here she was at a place in her life, a place of hurt, pain, and bitterness because life happened. Without even recognizing the process, we are seeing a woman filled with bitterness, pushing away those she loved, being mad at God and filled with just pain and hurt. What's your story today? You started out and things were going great. Never would you have imagined that things would have taken a turn for the worst. But life happened. Never did you think that you would have lost your business. Never would you have thought that you would have lost some important assets, some valuable assets. Never would you have thought that things would have gone south. But life happened. And sometimes we get stuck in the process. We don't become empowered. We don't move on because we're stuck. But this evening, I challenge us. The story may be painful. I know it must have hurt Naomi. It must have cost her a lot. But guess what? She moved on. She made a decision to return home, and we know the story quite well. Things changed for her. And so I challenge us. We may be in a place of bitterness. We may be mad, completely mad. And we may be able to justify why we're feeling like this. But we can choose to be better based on what we went through. I choose to put it down. This rock is heavy. He can hardly manage it. It looks as if almost that, it's about to crush him. But I choose to put it down. What about you? On the right, this young lady is struggling again with a baggage. And it says, emotional baggage is heavy. If you're tired of carrying it around with you, put it down. It may not be easy, but make a commitment, a decision, and being intentional about putting it down. Conclusion. Offense, hurt, pain, loss will come. They are inevitable. However, we do not have to become bitter. We can choose to become better. Will it be easy? No. But change starts with a decision. It starts with us making a decision to not remain bitter. So that's the decision tonight. I'm making a decision not to remain bitter, but to be better. Let your past make you better, not bitter. So that means we may have to read books. We may have to watch some videos on how to overcome bitterness. It may mean that we need to get help. We may need to go sit down and cry before a therapist and just bawl. Because maybe we have been, covering it up for so long. Crying is good. Allow your pain to make you better, grow from it. So now you can learn some new things. Use your experience to uplift others. Start a blog, write a book, start an organization aimed at empowering others. But whatever it is, don't allow your experience to be wasted. I choose empowerment over bitterness. How about you? Finally, the difficulties of life are intended to make us better, not bitter. Thank you so much for listening. Are there any questions? Ms. Thomas, anybody there?
Oh, what an empowering session. Oh my God. I certainly hope the audience has their questions lined up because I have my questions, okay? This was really, really empowering. I mean, I was in therapy. And I just want to invite the audience, if you have questions, now is your time to ask it. I'm going to ask you to just raise your hands and I'll see if I can navigate this to call on you. And when I have called on you, then you may open your mic. I'm also going to invite you to post your questions in the chat. So if you have questions for our presenter, I'm going to ask you to post your questions in the chat, and we will we'll take them as quickly as we can, because I want as many persons as possible to get the chance to ask their questions. I'm going to start off with a question for you. And I'm wondering, I know that forgiveness is the antidote for bitterness, but my question is, how do we know when we have forgiven? How do we know when we have forgiven?
All right, so one of the key, well, before I say what is the key, let me say what the misconception is. The misconception says, if I've truly forgiven the individual, we have to go back to being best friends. We have to, get along. But that's a misconception. I can forgive you and our relationship is not restored to what it initially was. So we know that we have truly forgiven when we can see the offender and that thing that we feel inside, that hurt is not there anymore, that pain is not there anymore, the idea of revenge is not there anymore. And in addition to that, when we can really get to the point where, if the person is in need, we can extend ourselves and offer some amount of assistance, that's key. It's not there anymore. We don't cringe when we hear the person name. We don't feel bitter or mad or just down when we see the individual. Those are some of the indicators that, hey, I'm really growing. I've forgiven this person. I'm proud of myself. Yes.
Okay, that's powerful. And I guess it answers what would have been my next question, because my next question was going to be, is it normal to still feel hurt after you have forgiven? But based on what you've just said about not being offended by the offender's presence anymore, I guess the answer to that would be a no. You wanna go a little further on that for me?
Right. So a part of it is a part of your healing process is not having that pain again. So once that's gone, you can say, okay, I have forgiven. But it's important to know that we're not saying that it's, overnight. It's a process. So sometimes we may feel on top of the world, yeah, man, I'm good, I've forgiven. And by tomorrow you realize that, hey, there's still something else that I need to work on, because yesterday I didn't feel this hurt, but today I recognize that there's still something else. So those are things to look out for.
Beautiful. I see somebody in the chat say, Father, forgive us. Let me see if I can read that. Lisette Martin. Lisette, I'm so happy to have you online. She says, Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those trespass against us. Boy, I'm not seeing you, but I know that's you, Lisette. Thank you. Thank you so much. Before it says, wonderful session, so informative. Great job, Sherika. Mind persons, feel free to put your questions in the chat. You can go ahead and type your questions here and we will have them addressed for you. I want to just go back to one of the quotations that you used, Sherika, and you said Martin Luther King says, never succumb to the temptation of bitterness. I listened to you speak, and the more you expounded on the subject, as in empowerment versus bitterness, the more I got the impression it's a choice. Do you want to go a little further on that for me?
Sure. I think that quote was just so powerful. And as I said, as I prepared, maybe the younger version of me, I'm still young, but the younger version of me would have said, no, it's not a choice. I don't choose to be bitter. But what happened is we have to recognize that with each choice that we make, each decision, that we are presented with multiple options, we have to recognize that each one that we choose have an outcome. So if we choose to dwell on the past, and if we choose to remain in a state of being the victim, then naturally it will lead to a particular result. And so our lives are filled with choices. And as we make these choices, they determine whether we become bitter or better. So the reality is nobody gets up and say, I choose to be bitter, right? We don't do that. But by the small decisions or even the major decisions, each decision can take us to bitterness, or it can take us to actually being better or empowered. So that's what it means in terms of a choice.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I see here, Pastor Coron Gordon, she says, could you explain why people feel guilt for bearing a hurt after being offended? Because sometimes they're made to feel that they haven't healed fast enough. Could you explain? Yes, that's a good question. Why do the offenders think they have the right to tell you how quickly to heal? Can you take that a little further? Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor, for that question. It's a very good question. The truth is, because from a Christian perspective, we emphasize forgiveness. And because the Bible says, you know, if you know that someone has ought against you, go back and make it right. And we push forgiveness. So persons that are hurt want to feel like, oh, I need to forgive by tomorrow, or I need to forgive today. So forgiveness, even though it's a process, it's almost as if we're forced to say, I have forgiven, even when we haven't, right? And so the truth is, we haven't fully embraced the fact that healing is a journey. We haven't fully embraced the fact that unforgiveness and forgiving the person is a journey. And so we have to now recognize that persons take time to heal. Persons heal at different rates. When I was bitter and I was mad and angry, I actually stopped talking to people because they would tell me, you need to move on now. And I'm thinking, I am here trying to move on. What you mean I need to move on now? I am trying. I want to move on, right? I think I'm doing the best that I can. But persons don't understand that it's more than just getting up and saying, oh, I'm healed today. It's a process. So tomorrow I may feel right back at square zero. But I keep pressing and I keep going, because that's how we keep moving forward.
And so I'm wondering about the matter of forgiveness without receiving an apology. And so it has me asking a question. Is there any fairness in forgiveness, really? Because sometimes we feel that we have been wronged, and really we should receive an forgiveness. We should receive an apology to help to advance us to the next step of forgiveness. But based on your delivery this evening, I'm taking away the fact that if we really want to be healed, we can't wait around on an apology. And so I am asking you, do you think that the forgiveness process is sometimes an unfair one?
I would be happy to say yes, but then it comes back to, we look at forgiveness, because for a long time we have looked at forgiveness in respect to the offender. So I'm doing it for them. I'm forgiving for them. But because we are changing how we view it tonight, and we're saying, I'm forgiving for me. So irrespective of what you do, I am forgiving for me. So I'm choosing to forgive whether I get that apology or not. Mark you, sometimes the apology, it helps, because the person is acknowledging that I did you wrong. And sometimes that's the missing piece, because I'm hurt and I'm bitter because you hurt me, but that person just can't understand how come I'm hurt over what they did. And so the missing link a lot of time is the person admitting that my actions actually cause you pain. And that's what the apology does. It says, hey, I'm Sherika. I know that I hurt you. You did not deserve this, and I am sorry. But the truth is, many times that doesn't happen. And sometimes it happens years later, and we can't afford to wait on it because our life is being impacted. So I honestly believe that it's perspective. When we get to the point where we're recognizing that I am freeing myself from prison, so whether you want to apologize or not, I am doing it for me. That's when it makes sense. But it can seem a little bit unfair. It can seem a little bit as if, you know, it's demanding much of us. But at the end of the day, it is for me. So I'm doing it for me.
Sometimes I think it may feel like I've been hurt and now I'm hurting again, because on top of hurting, I'm being asked to forgive somebody who hasn't even acknowledged the wrong that they've done. But as you rightly say, I guess if we can remind ourselves that it is for us, then we will see the value in taking the first step. I see Kate Thomas here asking a question. I see Pastor Donna Pengele asking to make us wanting to make a comment. I'm gonna take your comment, Pastor Pengele, in a minute. Let me just ask the question from Kay Thomas first. It says, what if you have moved past the hurt, but it keeps recurring? Good question. What if you've moved past it, or at least you feel you have moved past it, but somehow it keeps coming back like a recurring decimal? How do we deal with that?
This is a very good question. My question is for clarity. Is it that the hurt from the pain keeps reoccurring, or is it that the instant that causes the pain keep reoccurring? So is it that the person keeps stepping on my toe, or is it that the hurt from the initial time that he stepped on my toe keeps reoccurring? If it is that the hurt keep reoccurring from the first time, or from the time that the person stepped on my toe, it means I haven't fully dealt with it. If it is a case where there's reoccurrence of the stepping on toe, then we need to sit back and ask some question. Why is it that this keeps on happening, right? So it would be interesting to know from Kate Thomas, which scenario is it? Is it the hurtful situation that keeps on reoccurring, or is it the pain that is associated with the situation, the initial one, that keeps on reoccurring?
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Kate Thomas as soon as you get a chance to clarify that for us. I kind of think is the situation keeps recurring. Yep, she has responded. The situation, but with different persons.
Okay, so that's very good. That's a very good question. And so this forces us to grow, because if it is that each time someone steps on my toe, I'm reacting the same way, it means that something in me should be changed by now. So I'm no longer expecting 90% from you because you stepped on my toe before. So it would be good to introspect to find out, is it that I am not changing, or I'm responding to the situation? Because remember, the only person we have control over is us. So we now need to think. It happened with, let's say, Mary. It happened with Jane, and now it's happening with Thomas. Always my approach to these three persons different? Am I responding the same way? Maybe I need to read a book. How do I forgive a liar? Or maybe I need added information to change how I respond, because the only person we have control over is us. I hope I answered your question, Kay Thomas.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Pastor Donna Pengele, she's been waiting to make a comment. I'm going to ask you to unmute your mic. She's on the Makeda Green. So I'm going to ask the host if you have to unmute her mic, if you could go ahead and do that for me. Pastor Pengele.
Amen, amen. Hearing me?
You're yes, go ahead. We're hearing you.
Yes.
All right. So very good presentation, and I have been blessed and refreshed by it. Just want to, really make a comment as Miss Anderson, as she spoke about how do you know when you have forgiven? Yes, and I had an experience, and very quickly, I want to just make a point here. Now, as she rightfully say, you will know when you have forgiven, because you feel there is something. If when you see the person, you still get this your heart racing fast and you feel your body getting nervous, then it's a signal that yes, you have not. I have experienced bitterness. I'm not a person to harbor bitterness, but I remember years ago I experienced it, and to the point where I would go way out. The person that did me wrong was nowhere in sight. So I could go to town. I just want to hear the name. If I hear the name, my heart would start beating, I get headache, and that would be the end of my day, because of how wounded I was, because of what the individual has done repeatedly. And I remember when I forgave the person, like you rightfully say, you hear the name and it's no longer a bother. You see the person and you can say hi. The person also know it's very critical, because emotion is something, truth you can feel. And so if you have truly forgiven the person, believe me, when you walk up to the person is going to feel that also. Even if on their side, they're having any form of unforgiveness, they are going to feel the truth in you. They're going to know it. And so I remember going through that process. And I just want to say, after you have been badly hurt and you have forgiven and learned how to forgive, everything else that comes after, you know how, as it relates to being hurt, you know how to get over it more easier and quicker. I want to say to us, the key thing is, don't let whatever happen, don't replay it over in the mind, over and over and over and over. Know when to draw back. It comes to the mind, but you have to know when to say, no further. I will never be the same again. I will never return. I have closed that door. When we have learned to forgive one serious situation, we will master how to forgive anything after that. And we'll be very open-minded, and we'll also learn how not to let things be absorbed in our spirit. So I pray that the Lord help us all today.
Great point there coming from Pastor Donna Pengeli. Thank you so very much. And I think this is a good point at which to ask the next question. I noted in your presentation, Sherika, that you said bitterness affects him. I hear Pastor Pengeli talking about the heart racing, and talking about, getting nervous. And I'm saying, why that sound like a bully system? But this is how she reacted to the bitterness. And maybe each of us may react differently. Maybe that's not how we react. We find ourselves with different forms of discomfort and of anxiety. You said it affects the immune. I think this is a good point. Place here for you to just elaborate on that for us, because that sounds to me like something that can, in fact, physically. Yes? Would you take it from here, Sherika?
Right. So one of the things that we have to come into understanding is that the things that we experience emotionally affects us physically. So a good indication, as Pastor said, is that in terms of the rapid heartbeat, the heart racing, the sweating, lack of sleep, changes in appetite. So these are stuff that are linked to our mental health, but they also manifest physically. So we have to recognize that, bitterness, anger, hatred, these are all things that affects us physically. One of the interesting things that I've seen in regards to persons who have died of cancer was that somebody said that their emotional state contributed to their process. And so we have to recognize that what's happening with us emotionally, there's a connection between that and our physical state. It affects, in some weird way, it affects our brain functioning, and by extension, it can affect the entire body. So we have to recognize that it does affect us physically as well.
Thank you for that. All right, I see Thomas in the chat saying, I think one of the things that helps me is praying earnestly from a pure heart for the person. And I'm going to be a little control. I'm going to say, how do I pray for somebody I've not yet forgiven? I'm going to ask you that. So it's a comment that says, praying for the person from a pure heart is what has helped Thomas to overcome bitterness and to forgive. But my question is, how somebody somebody from a pure heart if I forgive them. Is that actually a step in helping me to forgive something that happens after I have comfortably forgiven? Could you elaborate on that for me?
So that's an interesting thought. Thank you, Thomas. So what we have to recognize is that tied to bitterness is retaliatory behavior. So if I'm praying for my offender, I'm not going to be praying, if I'm praying from a true heart, I'm not going to be praying that judgment will come and that the day of vengeance will come and be praying for revenge. So in terms of praying for the person to excel and Lord, forgive them, and praying for the best interest of the person, that's actually going against what the bitterness would dictate. So it helps us in becoming less retaliatory, less revengeful, and move towards overcoming the situation. And so it's not the easiest thing, but it helps us. Because a part of prayer too, we know the miraculous power of prayer. So as we pray more and as we intercede and seek God on behalf of this person, it's giving God the opportunity to further deal with our heart and to help us to see what's inside our heart. And it helps us along the journey. So I agree with you. I agree with Thomas. It may not be the easiest thing at first. Maybe we just start with the basic. God, remember Johnny. And then tomorrow we can say, Lord, please bless Johnny. And then we can take it a bit further and say, Lord, please cover him under your blood. And then we take it a bit further. And you know, the more we move away from retaliation, because initially it was, God, please, you have to judge him. You have to, Father, vengeance is yours. Now is the day of vengeance. But as we pray and as we release it, it deals with our heart and bring forth healing, our healing, and so we can move on.
All right, beautiful, and we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up. Caron says, "LOL. I learned when I was growing, when the word forgiveness itself didn't. When the word forgiveness itself didn't make you angry, that's when you knew you had forgiven." Good point.
Yes, that's good.
I can easily understand that, because until I have forgiven, I find the word offensive, because
Yes.
it feels to me I'm being hastened into healing and not being given a chance to really deal with my feelings. So I can easily identify with what Coron Gordon has said here. I think Beverly White is saying, I think it's very hard to forgive a person that hurts you at all times. How can I get over it? It sounds to me like a case of repeated offenses.
Right.
She's asking how to get over the repeated offenses. That's
okay.
Beverly's question.
Thank you for your question, Beverly. No, we have to understand that hurt is hurt. Repeated offense, if we're not careful, we justify our unforgiveness because it was repeated. So we have to be mindful of the fact that we recognize that we are hurting, and right now I'm in a place of bitterness. But we have to ensure that we're not saying, you know what, he or she did this to me last week, the year before, the month before that, so I really can't forgive, right? Having recognized that and not using that to justify the unforgiveness, the first thing we have to do is to, as we spoke about earlier, to recognize that for my own healing and well-being, despite the fact that it was multiple offenses, I need to forgive this person so that I can heal. And so to start the process, Beverly, is to make a commitment to yourself. Because the truth is, as long as we are at a place of bitterness, we continue to feel the pain, the hurt, we continue to cry ourselves to sleep, we continue to question God why we have to go through this. And so we have to get to the place where we are willing to do something different. So this is what I've been doing. I've been in a state of unforgiveness and bitterness, but I am choosing now to do something different for my sake, right? It may be that every morning I have to get up and talk to myself that I am not going to think about these things. I'm not going to play this scenario over and over and over again. I'm choosing to work on me. And so it will require work. It's not, you know, we wave a magic wand and I'm good to go. It's real work. It's a daily process, and it's a journey. There are days when you will feel like you have made some significant gains, and then there are times when you feel, oh God, I'm right back at square zero. Am I moving forward or not? But it's all a part of the healing process. So it starts with recognizing that even though it was multiple times, you're doing it for you. And once you start there, then you can take the other steps.
Awesome. I think you handled that so well. You know, I'm reading here, and yes, Corona, I have to agree with you, Dr. Gordon. Our presenter is not about to allow us to forget that forgiveness is our responsibility.
Right.
Corona says you're sticking to your guns. And I have to agree with her. Because at the end of the day, we have to remember we're not forgiving for the person who offended us. Where forgiveness is for us, not for the offender. And I think the reason it challenges us so much is because based on the hurt we feel, the controversial thinking is that forgiveness is benefiting the offender. But if we can recognize through all that you've shared this evening, that forgiveness is really to our benefit, I think it will be easier to move on. I think you did such an excellent session this evening, but I'm not going to be the one moving the vote of thanks. I'm going to be asking Pastor Sarah Bailey to do that.
Before we do, just one point to throw in. The thing is that sometimes forgiveness, sometimes it's difficult to wrap our mind around forgiveness because of the misconceptions that we hold towards forgiveness. So forgiveness in no way takes away the responsibility from the person who hurt or caused the offense. That's not what it's doing. When we choose to forgive, we're not saying, hey, it's not your fault for hurting me, or it's my responsibility, you hurt me. It's not about that. It's about me moving on. So we're not saying that the person is not guilty. Right? That's not what forgiveness does. It does not say that the person is not guilty or the person is innocent. In no way forgiveness does that. What forgiveness does is that we are acknowledging that I'm in charge of me and I am choosing, I have responsibility for my well-being and I am choosing to move on. Right? So it does not say that we are taking responsibility for ourselves and we're not passing that on to the offender. My final words in Jesus' name.
Well, listen, I think that final point just made forgiveness feel a whole lot easier to me.
Yes.
Because in fact, that is a part of the challenge. We feel that it takes away the responsibility from the offender to acknowledge the offense that they've committed. But you're saying that's not what it's about. It's about helping ourselves to move on and to find ourselves being better, not bitter. Right. I think this was such a fabulous session, and I want to thank everybody that was online, and even as Sarah Bailey gets ready to do the vote of thanks, I want to say to our audience today, if you want to hear Miss Anderson again, she will be one of our speakers at the online conference, which we will have on December 5, entitled Her Story Changed. Her Story Changed. That's another Predestined online conference that's coming up on December 5. We have guest speaker, Dr. Jessica, Miss CEO Mosley out of Indianapolis. We have our own Dr. Corona Gordon. And of course, the woman on the screen who has fed us so much tonight, our own Sherika Anderson. I'm going to ask you, Pastor Sarah Bailey, just to do the vote of thanks for us right here.
Good evening, everyone. Let me just thank our speaker in the person of Ms. Sherika Anderson for such an enlightening, profound, adequately compacted presentation. I must say that indeed it was really, really enlightening, and it has really spoken to me as an individual as well. I really, in particularly, feel humbled this evening, and I must genuinely say I am very, very happy to know that the body of Christ has persons like you within it. Because quite frankly, I've thought for many years that the church is void of psychologists. And as such, you know, we just use the word to hit people all over the heads and across their backs and whip people into righteousness. And quite frankly, a lot of the times it creates rebellion. And so I am very, very happy to know that you are also a part of the body of Christ. You have really spoken life into us today, and I'm sure many persons will leave here feeling better instead of bitter and empowered for the future, being able to let go of the past. And so again, we want to thank you on behalf of Predestined, the team, our coach, life coach, Keisha Thomas. We want to also say thank you for being here and for just taking the time out to speak to us in the manner in which you did. The presentation was really, really intriguing. It kept us attentive. You know, the information wasn't boring. And so again, thank you so very much. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Sarah Bailey. And before we go, I want to remind the persons online, if you want to receive, you know, a copy of the presentation that was shared this evening, please drop your email address in the chat before you go. If we don't have your email address, we don't know how to contact you, to add you to our mailing list and to share the written material with you. I know you want to get a hold of this content. I don't think you want to be left out. So if you know you forget a point, you can go back and read it again and remember hearing Miss Anderson's voice saying, yes, it's our responsibility. So drop your email address in the chat. I'm gonna just keep it up and keep the line open a little bit to allow persons enough time to do that. We will collect your information and we will share the content with you. Again, I remind you, on December 5, Predestined will have another online conference, and it's going to be under the theme, Her Story Changed. I cannot tell you how excited I am about that. And that's just for a minimal cost of $15 US. So look out for the flyer, look out for the post on social media. You register at spurropen.com. That's Spur, S-P-U-R-R, open.com. You register online there and secure your space. You do not want to miss this one. Beautiful evening. I thank you all once again. Thanks to all who were online. My own bishops, I don't know if they're still on, but again, I'm grateful for your prayers and support, and to my team, thank you so much for helping to make this happen. Miss Anderson, you are a godsend. Thank you for empowering women. Sarah, thank you so much again. And just go ahead and throw the email addresses in. Just go ahead and throw them in. Just go ahead and throw them in. Thank you, Danielle. You were so helpful to me in getting this up. And Donna and Melissa and my kids and everybody. God bless you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. God bless you, everybody.
Always my pleasure. So I'm going to ask you, Donna, not to close the line because I want persons to be able to throw the email addresses in before we sign off. Thank you again. Have a great evening, everyone. And remember, I choose to put it down. I choose to put it down. God bless you.